It was just a bump on her neck, until the day she collapsed in class and never stood back up. They said it was nothing, just a rash, just a phase. But by the time they finally looked closer, it had already spread to her lungs, her bones, her future. This isn't just a story about cancer. It's about what happens when the people who should listen don't. Have you ever ignored a symptom in yourself or someone you love because you were afraid it was nothing? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone notice sooner. And if you believe stories like this can save lives, hit subscribe because sometimes one story can be the difference between waiting and surviving. The sirens came just after midnight, slicing through the quiet streets of Ruston like something breaking. The rain hadn't stopped all day, but now it came in thin, desperate streaks, washing the pavement clean of everything except the sound of panic. Megan Parker ran beside the stretcher as two paramedics pushed it through the sliding doors of St. Augustine Hospital. Her shoes slapped against the wet floor. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, humming like angry bees. "Please," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Please, she's only 12. One of the paramedics shouted over his shoulder, "We're doing everything we can, ma'am. You need to stay back." But Megan didn't move. Her eyes locked on the small figure lying under the thin blanket. Ellie's skin looked pale, almost translucent. Her lips were slightly parted, breath shallow. The navy scarf she always wore was still wrapped around her neck, soaked through the fabric dark with blood and rainwater. A nurse grabbed Megan gently, guiding her to the wall. "Let them work." The world blurred into sound monitors, beeping rubber soles, squeaking metal trays, clattering. The ER doors swung open and closed like lungs struggling to breathe. Through the glass panel, Megan saw one of the doctors lift the scarf from Ellie's neck. He froze for a moment. Even from across the room, Megan caught the flicker of horror on his face. The skin beneath wasn't just bruised, it was broken, angry, something dark spreading under the surface like spilled ink. She pressed her hand to the glass. "Ellie," she whispered. The flat-line tone rose for a second before dipping again, erratic. In the hallway, a photograph slipped from Megan's pocket and fell face up onto the wet tile, a smiling girl with messy hair dimples and a blue scarf tied neatly under her chin. It had started with something so small. 2 months earlier, the house on Birchwood Lane was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. The kind that belongs to early mornings, not to fear. The coffee machine clicked on before dawn, sputtering out its first tired breath. Megan Parker stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, staring at the dark window above the sink. Outside, the world was still fogged with sleep. The school bus wouldn't come for another hour. She rubbed her temples, waiting for the caffeine to convince her she could survive another day. From down the hall came a faint sound of humming Ellie's voice. The tune was unsteady, half asleep. Something she must have picked up from one of those nature documentaries she watched late at night. Megan smiled despite herself. For all the exhaustion that seemed to wrap around her like a second skin, that sound still made her heart ache in a good way. Ellie appeared in the doorway, hair-tangled pajama sleeves too long, holding a half-finished sketchbook against her chest. "Morning," she mumbled. "Morning sunshine," Megan said, forcing brightness into her tone. "You're up early. I couldn't sleep." Ellie sat at the kitchen table and opened her sketchbook. She started to draw without looking up, lines, circles, shapes that meant something only to her. Megan poured coffee into a chipped mug. "Bad dreams again?" Ellie shrugged. "Not bad, just loud." "Loud dreams sound bad to me," Megan said, half smiling as she buttered a slice of toast. Ellie didn't answer. Her pencil kept moving soft strokes on the page. The refrigerator clicked. The faucet dripped. The house breathed in small, tired noises. On the far wall hung a photograph of Megan and Ellie at the county fair the year before sunlight cotton candy freckles across Ellie's nose. They looked happy, the kind of happy that belongs to moments no one realizes are temporary. "Do I have to go to gym today?" Ellie asked suddenly. Megan looked up. "Since when do you hate gym?" "You used to love dodgeball." Ellie hesitated, fingers tightening around her pencil. "I just don't feel great." Megan leaned closer. "You're not sick, are you?" "No," Ellie said quickly. "Just tired." Megan sighed. "We're both tired, kiddo. Mondays are brutal." She smiled, trying to make it sound like a joke. "Go get dressed. You'll feel better once you move." Ellie stood tucking the sketchbook under her arm. As she turned, her hair shifted, and Megan noticed a faint red mark just below her jawline, round small, like a bug bite. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. Ellie brushed her fingers over it. "Probably nothing. Maybe a mosquito." Megan squinted, then waved it off. "Well, don't scratch it. It'll go away." Ellie nodded and disappeared down the hall. By the time Megan gathered her things, lesson plans, papers to grade the reusable coffee mug she'd had since college, the sun had finally broken through the fog. A single beam cut through the living room blinds, landing on a small poster she'd pinned up months ago for her students. "Check your skin once a month. Early detection saves lives." She glanced at it just long enough for her eyes to register the words before her mind filtered them out as background noise. When she stepped outside, the air smelled like rain and cut grass. Her car, a faded Honda, sat under a tree, still dripping from last night's storm. She climbed in, tossed her bag onto the passenger seat, and looked back at the house. Ellie stood by the window, scarfing down cereal hair, messy again. Megan smiled and waved. Ellie waved back, but it was small, almost shy. The drive to school was a short 10 minutes through quiet streets where every mailbox looked the same. On the radio, a health segment was playing a doctor reminding listeners to schedule their annual checkups. Megan turned the volume down more out of habit than defiance. At the first red light, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes, tired lips pale. "You look like your own mother," she murmured. The light turned green. She drove on. Back at the house, the kitchen clock ticked toward 8:00 a.m. The faucet dripped once, twice, then stopped. In Ellie's sketchbook, the page she'd left open showed a drawing of a tree. The roots were dark, spreading wide beneath the soil, almost like something growing where it shouldn't. By Wednesday, the mark on Ellie's neck had changed. What had been a faint red dot now looked darker, the edges rougher, the center almost purple. When she pressed it, it didn't hurt, but it felt strange, like a pebble under her skin. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tilting her head left and right, watching it catch the morning light. The house was quiet. Her mom had already left early for a teacher's meeting. Steam from the shower fogged the glass, blurring her reflection until only her outline remained. Ellie touched the mark again, whispering to herself, "It's fine." But her voice sounded like someone else's, someone pretending. She pulled the navy scarf from the hook behind the door and wrapped it around her neck twice tight enough that the fabric pressed against the spot. The soft wool made her feel safer, as if she could hide from whatever was underneath. At school, Mrs. Coleman asked the class to stand up for presentations. Ellie kept her seat, clutching her sketchbook. "Ellie, are you feeling all right?" Mrs. Coleman asked, gentle but curious. Ellie nodded quickly. "Just tired." Some of the kids at the next table whispered. One girl snickered. "She's hiding a vampire bite." Laughter rippled through the room. Mrs. Coleman frowned. "That's enough." Ellie kept her eyes on her notebook, drawing small circles that grew darker harder until the pencil broke. When she got home that afternoon, Megan was still on a Zoom call explaining fractions to a row of muted rectangles on her laptop screen. Ellie hovered near the door, scarf still on lunch, uneaten in her hand. "Hey, honey," Megan said between words, covering the mic. "You feeling better?" Ellie shrugged. "Yeah." "Good. Dinner's in the fridge. I'll be done soon." She wanted to say it then that the bump looked worse, that it scared her, but Megan's voice had already turned back to teacher mode. Ellie slipped down the hall, closing her bedroom door quietly behind her. Inside, the late sunlight fell across her drawings pinned to the wall, birds, trees, faces. All bright colors except for one, the newest sketch. A girl sitting by a window scarf around her neck, a shadow blooming beneath it like spilled ink. That night, as the rain started again, Megan passed her daughter's room and paused. Through the thin crack under the door, she saw the light still on. For a second, she thought of knocking. But then she told herself not to hover. Ellie was growing up. She needed space. In her own room, Megan set her alarm, turned off the lamp, and lay back in the dark. Somewhere down the hall, a faucet began to drip again, soft, steady, relentless. Ellie touched the bump one last time before sleeping. It felt slightly warmer now, like it was alive. She pulled the scarf tighter and whispered, "Just don't let it show." By the end of the month, the scarf had become part of Ellie's uniform. She wore it to school, to the store, even to sleep. When Megan asked about it, Ellie just smiled and said she liked how it felt soft, warm, comforting. It's almost summer. Megan laughed one morning, pouring milk into a glass. "You'll melt if you keep that thing on." Ellie grinned faintly. "Then I'll be the warmest kid in Ohio." It was the kind of small, clever answer that made Megan smile and move on. At school, though, the scarf was harder to ignore. Kids notice everything. By the second week, a few classmates had started whispering again. Someone took a photo of Ellie in the hallway and posted it on a group chat with the caption, "Vampire Girl hides her bite." By lunch, everyone had seen it. When Mrs. Coleman noticed Ellie eating alone, she sat down across from her. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to wear that scarf all the time. You have such a lovely smile. You shouldn't hide behind it." Ellie looked down at her sandwich. "I just like it, that's all." Mrs. Coleman hesitated. "If anything's bothering you, health home anything, you can tell me. I'll listen." Ellie's throat tightened. For a second, she thought she might, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded, forced a smile, and said, "Thanks, but I'm fine." That night, Megan came home late from tutoring. The house was dim except for the glow of the television in the living room. Ellie was curled up on the couch, still wearing the scarf, watching a wildlife documentary. "You're still awake?" Megan asked, slipping off her shoes. "It's almost over," Ellie said. "It's about how baby birds learn to fly." "Sounds inspiring." "They fall first," Ellie said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Some of them don't make it." Megan walked over, brushing Ellie's hair back. "You think too much for a 12-year-old." Ellie smiled faintly. "You say that a lot? Well, I'm not wrong." Megan kissed her forehead. Bedtime philosopher. Ellie turned off the TV and went to her room. The next morning, she stood in front of the mirror again. The mark had spread just slightly, the edges darker now, a bruise that didn't look like any bruise she'd seen before. She wrapped the scarf tighter and stared at herself until her reflection looked like a stranger. Later that week, Megan noticed Ellie had drawn something new on her bedroom wall. A girl, small and lonely, standing under a rainstorm. The raindrops were black. "Beautiful work," Megan said, stepping into the doorway. "But maybe add some color, sunshine, flowers?" Ellie shook her head. "It's supposed to be night." Megan smiled, not seeing the fear beneath the words. She leaned on the doorframe, rubbing her eyes. "You and your moods. You'll be an artist someday." Ellie didn't answer. She just looked at the drawing again, her fingers touching the black streaks, and said quietly, "Maybe." When Megan turned away, the faucet in the kitchen began to drip again, slow, steady like a heartbeat no one was listening to. It was a Thursday when Megan finally decided to make an appointment. Ellie's mark hadn't gone away. In fact, it looked worse, darker, thicker, like the skin was tightening around it. The clinic sat between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner, a beige building that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old magazines. Megan filled out forms at the front desk while Ellie swung her legs from the waiting chair, staring at the fish tank beside her. Ms. Parker, a nurse, called. They followed her down a narrow hallway lined with posters, "Know your ABCDEs of skin cancer." "Check your skin once a month." Megan glanced at them but didn't read. Dr. Lawrence entered with the tired energy of a man who'd seen too many patients in one day. His white coat was slightly wrinkled, his voice automatic. "So," he said, glancing at the chart, "we've got a little infection, huh?" Megan gestured to Ellie. "It started small, but it's not going away. It's darker now." The doctor bent down, examined Ellie's neck for less than 5 seconds, and smiled. "Looks like a mild case of folliculitis. Nothing to lose sleep over. I'll write a prescription for an antibiotic cream." Megan frowned. "Shouldn't we do a test or something? A biopsy?" Dr. Lawrence shook his head. "Insurance doesn't usually cover that unless it looks malignant, and this doesn't. Trust me, I've seen hundreds of these. He turned to his laptop, typing quickly, the clacking of the keys filling the silence. Ellie sat perfectly still, eyes on the poster behind him. Melanoma can appear in children too. The words blurred and reformed as if the letters themselves were whispering something her mother couldn't hear. When they left, Megan paid the copay at the counter and tucked the receipt into her wallet beside the grocery coupons. In the car, Ellie traced the edges of the paper bag that held the cream. "How do doctors know something's not serious if they don't check?" she asked quietly. Megan tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "They've studied this stuff, sweetheart. That's why we go to them." Ellie looked out the window. "But what if they're wrong?" Megan didn't answer. The light turned green. Traffic moved forward. That night, Ellie stood in front of the mirror again, spreading the cream carefully across the spot. The skin tingled, then burned. She winced, but didn't call out. Down the hall, Megan was grading papers, red pen moving over math sheets while the evening news murmured about rising healthcare costs. In the bathroom, the fluorescent bulb flickered. For a moment, Ellie thought she saw something pulsing beneath her skin, dark, slow, alive. She blinked, and it was gone. She turned off the light and whispered to the mirror, "Just let it stop growing." Behind her, a drop of water fell from the faucet and echoed in the porcelain sink, steady and cold. By the sixth morning, Megan couldn't ignore it anymore. Ellie's neck looked worse swollen, the edges jagged, a bruise that seemed to crawl beneath the skin. When Ellie turned her head too quickly and winced in pain, Megan dropped her coffee cup. "That's it," she said. "We're not waiting 10 days. She called the clinic, the same one where Dr. Lawrence had shrugged off her concern. The receptionist's voice was bright and robotic. "Hi, this is Megan Parker. My daughter was seen last week. It's getting worse. We need a specialist. Has she been referred to dermatology yet? She was told to wait 10 days. It's been 6. It's spreading. One moment, ma'am, I'll check." Click. Music. A soft jazz loop that felt like mockery. Megan stared at the kitchen clock as seconds ticked louder than the music. Ellie sat at the table stirring her cereal without eating. Her scarf was back on. When the receptionist returned, she sounded bored. "All right, the earliest available follow-up with your provider is next Thursday. That's in 9 days." "Yes, ma'am, I understand that's frustrating. I can add you to the cancellation list." "I don't need a list," Megan snapped. "I need a doctor. She's 12, she's in pain." Another pause. "I'm sorry, but your plan requires a referral for any specialist visit. If you go outside the network, you'll be responsible for the full amount." Megan gripped the counter until her knuckles went white. "And what happens if I wait, and it's something serious?" The woman's tone didn't change. "Then you can submit an appeal for coverage." When the line went dead, the silence felt like suffocation. She opened her laptop and searched skin bump not healing. Dark center, sore to touch. Results flooded the screen. Melanoma basal cell. Carcinoma rare in children, but possible. She clicked an article. Early detection of skin cancer can increase survival rates by over 90%. Warning signs include changes in color asymmetry and wounds that don't heal. Megan read the line twice. 90%. All it took was someone looking sooner. She scrolled further. Delays in diagnosis remain common due to insurance hurdles, limited pediatric dermatologists, and systemic neglect of atypical cases. She slammed the laptop shut. "Mom." Ellie's voice was small. "Are we going back to the doctor?" "Tomorrow?" Megan lied. "I'll figure it out." But that night she couldn't sleep. The house was too still, the air heavy. She tried another number, a different clinic out of network. "Yes, we take walk-ins," the woman on the phone said, "but without insurance coverage, the consult will be $245 up front." Megan's stomach dropped. Rent was due in 5 days. She whispered, "Okay, thank you," and hung up. At the table, her eyes fell on the insurance brochure pinned to the fridge, protecting families since 1972. The tagline looked cruel now. She thought of all the times she'd told her students to advocate for themselves, to trust the system. But now, with her daughter's future hanging in the balance, the system sounded like a machine made of hold music and paperwork. She returned to Ellie's room. The girl was asleep, face pale, one hand resting gently against the scarf. Megan brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I won't wait anymore," she whispered. "Not another day." The faucet dripped in the bathroom again, steady, rhythmic like the sound of time running out. It happened on a Friday morning. The sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when Ellie shuffled into her classroom, her scarf looped tight. Her shoulders slumped. Mrs. Coleman noticed immediately the girl who once drew little suns in the corners of her papers now looked gray, dimmed somehow. "Morning, sweetheart," the teacher said softly. "Rough night." Ellie nodded weakly, setting her backpack down. Her hands trembled slightly. During math, she stared at the whiteboard numbers blurring together. When Mrs. Coleman called on her to solve a fraction, she stood pencil in hand and the world tilted. A sound like distant rushing filled her ears. Then darkness. The pencil fell first, then Ellie. Her body hit the floor with a soft thud, followed by the sharp gasp of 20 children. Chairs scraped back. Someone screamed. Ellie? Mrs. Coleman was at her side in seconds, turning the girl gently onto her back. Her skin felt too cool, her pulse faint. The scarf had loosened slightly, revealing the mottled skin underneath, angry, dark, swollen. "Oh my God!" Mrs. Coleman whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Call the nurse, now!" The intercom crackled. Then came footsteps, hurried voices, the metallic slam of a first aid kit. Within minutes, the nurse was there. She knelt beside Ellie, pressing a stethoscope against her chest. Her heart's racing. Then, more quietly, "That's not an infection." An ambulance was called. When Megan's phone rang, she was in the teacher's lounge grading papers she didn't care about. She answered on the second ring. "Ms. Parker, this is Westwood Middle. Your daughter fainted during class. The paramedics are on their way." The room spun. "What?" "She's awake, but weak. They're taking her to St. Joseph's Hospital." Megan didn't remember the drive, only the red lights, the blur of sirens ahead, the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking. At the hospital, the world smelled like antiseptic and fear. Ellie lay on a narrow bed, an IV taped to her arm, her face pale as paper. Machines beeped steadily beside her. "She's stable," a nurse said, "but we need to run some tests." Megan stood frozen at the foot of the bed. "What tests?" A man in scrubs entered, a dermatologist on rotation, Dr. Patel, his ID badge hanging crooked. His eyes were kind but serious. "I heard there's a lesion on her neck," he asked. Megan nodded. "The other doctor said it was an infection." "May I take a look?" Ellie blinked, barely conscious, and nodded faintly. Dr. Patel lifted the scarf with care. The room fell silent. The lesion was no longer just a spot. It was a wound, jagged and discolored, pulsing beneath the skin like something alive. He exhaled slowly. "How long has this been here?" "Almost 2 months." He removed his gloves, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm scheduling a biopsy immediately. A biopsy." Megan's throat went dry. "You think—" "I think it's something we should have looked at a long time ago." The words struck like ice. Megan gripped her daughter's hand, whispering, "You're going to be okay, baby. You're going to be okay." Ellie tried to smile. "I told them," she murmured weakly. No one listened. Her eyelids fluttered shut. And, in the bright humming silence of the hospital room, Megan finally understood what those words meant. The biopsy took less than 15 minutes. A needle, a whisper of pain, a sterile dressing. Then a week of waiting that stretched like forever. Every morning, Megan checked her phone before her coffee, before even breathing properly. Nothing. Every ring made her heart seize. Every silence made it worse. Ellie stayed home from school. She spent her days sketching in the living room, the hum of daytime television filling the air. Sometimes she drew birds, sometimes clouds, but lately her drawings had grown darker. Black branches, broken wings, figures fading at the edges. When Megan asked how she felt, Ellie would shrug. Tired. She tried to smile, but the spark that once lit her daughter's eyes had dimmed. On the 7th day, the phone finally rang. "Mrs. Parker," said the nurse on the line, her voice gentler than usual. Dr. Patel would like you to come in to discuss the results. Megan's breath caught. Can't you just tell me it's better if we talk in person? No one says come in for good news. At the hospital, the lights felt too bright, the chairs too clean. Ellie held Megan's hand as they sat in the waiting room. Her fingers were thin now, almost fragile. She traced the veins on her mother's wrist like a map. Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Parker Ellie. He led them into a small consultation room with beige walls and a single-framed photo of the ocean blue and endless. Megan focused on it because looking at him was harder. He sat down, folded his hands. The biopsy results are back. He paused. The tissue we sampled tested positive for malignant melanoma. The words didn't land right away. They hung in the air, foreign and impossible. What does that mean? Megan asked. Her voice cracked halfway through. It means it's a form of skin cancer, he said quietly. An aggressive one. Ellie looked up, eyes wide, searching her mother's face for an answer that wouldn't come. Dr. Patel continued carefully choosing each word. The swelling in her lymph nodes suggests it may have spread. We'll need imaging CT scans, blood work to see how far. Megan's world blurred. She heard herself say things like how soon and what next, but her own voice sounded far away. Beside her, Ellie's small hand slipped into hers. So, I was right, she whispered. It wasn't just a bump. Megan broke then. She leaned forward, head in her hands, sobbing quietly, the kind of cry that doesn't make sound, just trembles through the body. Dr. Patel waited. He'd seen this before too many times, but his eyes softened as he said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker. If it helps early, melanoma cases can respond well to treatment. Some even go into remission. Early, Megan echoed bitterly. If someone had listened early. He didn't argue. Later that night at home, Megan sat on the edge of Ellie's bed while the girl folded paper cranes. She'd read somewhere that 1,000 could grant a wish. How many do you have? Megan asked softly. 73, Ellie said, but I'll keep going. She looked up and smiled faintly. Do you think wishes come true? Megan swallowed hard. I think they do when someone really deserves them. Ellie placed one of the cranes in her mother's palm. Then this one's for you. Megan closed her fingers around it and whispered, No, sweetheart, this one's for you. The oncology wing didn't look like the rest of the hospital. It was quieter, softer. The air smelled faintly of lemon wipes and something sterile, like clean fear. A nurse handed Megan a clipboard, then a thin pink wristband for Ellie. Her name printed in neat black letters, Parker Ellie, 12Y. The treatment room was bright, almost too bright. Sunlight filtered through blinds falling across rows of recliner chairs where children sat hooked up to IV poles. Some read books, some just stared. A few smiled weakly when Ellie walked in as if to say, You're one of us now. Dr. Patel stopped by to explain everything. This will help slow the spread, he said gently. She'll feel tired, maybe nauseous. Her body's strong, she can handle it. Megan nodded, pretending to understand words like immunotherapy and targeted treatment. All she heard was hope. When the IV needle slid into Ellie's arm, the girl flinched but didn't cry. She just watched the clear liquid drip slowly through the tube. Each drop sounded like time. Hours passed. Machines hummed softly, steady as breathing. Megan sat beside her daughter, holding her hand, whispering stories about anything but hospitals. They talked about the beach trip they never took the puppy they'd get when this is over the stars they'd see together someday. When the first session ended, Ellie was pale and quiet. On the drive home, she threw up into a paper bag. Megan pulled over, held her hair back, whispering, It's okay, baby. It's okay. At home, Megan washed the blanket, opened the windows, and sat in the dark bathroom afterward, her reflection shaking in the tile. She looked older, like she'd lived 10 years in 2 weeks. The next morning, Ellie asked to see herself in the mirror. Megan hesitated, then nodded. The bandage on her neck had been changed, the skin beneath it raw, but cleaner. The doctor said that was a good sign. The treatment's working, he'd said. Ellie smiled faintly, but her eyes looked tired. She lifted a small lock of hair and tugged at it gently. It came loose in her fingers. She stared at it quiet. "I guess it's starting," she said softly. Megan smiled because that's what mothers do. "You'll rock the short hair, kiddo. Maybe I'll shave mine too." Ellie laughed through her tears. "You wouldn't." The next morning, Megan stood in the kitchen, clippers in hand. When Ellie came in, her mother's hair was gone short, uneven, brave. Ellie stared, then burst into laughter. "Now we match." For the first time in months, the house filled with sound again. As weeks passed, the nurses learned Ellie's name. The one with purple glasses always saved her a seat near the window. The volunteer brought popsicles. Ellie collected the wooden sticks in a jar beside her bed. Tiny trophies of endurance. Some nights Megan would wake to find Ellie sketching by the window. Not dark drawings this time, but birds' wings outstretched, flying higher than before. "Could you ever draw something happier?" Megan teased once. Ellie didn't look up. "These are happy," she said. "They're finally free." Megan smiled softly, realizing her daughter had learned something most adults never do: how to find light in the middle of the dark. Autumn came like a quiet confession. One morning, the trees outside the apartment turned gold. The next, their leaves were scattered across the sidewalk like little letters from the season saying everything changes. Ellie had been doing better, or so it seemed. Her color had returned. Her laughter, though softer, still filled the kitchen sometimes. She'd even gone back to art class twice a week. The teacher saved her seat near the window where the sunlight hit her paper just right. Dr. Patel had smiled at their last visit. No visible spread beyond the lymph nodes. The therapy's doing its job. Megan had exhaled for the first time in months. "You hear that she whispered to Ellie in the car? You're winning." For a few weeks they dared to live again. They made pancakes on Sundays. They talked about next summer's road trip, the beach, maybe even getting a dog. Ellie drew again: birds, trees, a girl standing on a cliff with a scarf that looked like wings. But the hope was fragile, like glass under pressure. It started with pain beneath her ribs. Small at first, like a stitch from running too fast, then sharper. When Megan asked if she was okay, Ellie smiled and said, "Just sore." A week later, she woke in the middle of the night, gasping for breath. Megan rushed in, heart-hammering. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Ellie pointed to her side. "It hurts. Right here." Her hand trembled. By morning, they were back in the hospital. The machines hummed again, the antiseptic smell returning like an unwelcome ghost. Dr. Patel ordered a scan. Megan waited in the hallway, palms pressed together, whispering silent prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening. When the doctor came back, his face told her everything before he spoke. "It's returned," he said quietly. "The cancer's spread to her lungs." Megan stared at him, eyes wide, words frozen in her throat. "But you said I know." His voice broke slightly. "We caught it early before, but melanoma can be unpredictable. It's aggressive in children. We'll start a stronger treatment, but it will be hard on her body. Harder, not better, not cured." In the car, Ellie rested her head against the window, watching the city blur by in streaks of gray and gold. "They said I was strong," she whispered. Megan swallowed hard. "You are." Ellie turned to her eyes, heavy but clear. "Then why did it come back?" Megan gripped the steering wheel so tight her hands hurt. "Because life isn't fair. But we keep fighting anyway." Ellie nodded slowly. "'Kay," she said. "Then I'll fight a little longer." That night, Megan sat beside her as she slept, counting each shallow breath. The machines in her mind beeped even in silence. Outside, the wind swept through the trees, carrying away the last of the leaves. Inside, a mother held her child's hand and pretended she still believed in miracles. By December, Ellie had grown smaller in every way. Her shoulders curved inward, her cheeks hollowed, and her voice carried the kind of softness that made people lean in to hear it. The treatments had stopped helping. The doctors said the word palliative now so gently it almost sounded kind. At home, Megan tried to pretend things were normal. She made pancakes even when Ellie couldn't eat them, turned on cartoons just to fill the silence. But there was no pretending anymore. Every cough, every labored breath reminded her that time was thinning, stretching fragile like glass before it breaks. One morning, Megan found Ellie sitting on her bed with a notebook open across her knees. The sunlight from the window hit the page like gold dust. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Ellie smiled faintly. "A list." Megan sat beside her. "Of what?" "Things that make me happy," Ellie said. "So you don't forget." Megan's throat tightened. "I could never forget. I know," Ellie said. "But sometimes when people are sad, they forget the small things. This will help." She turned the notebook so her mother could see. The handwriting was uneven, but beautiful. Things that make me happy, drawing. Mom's tea. The smell of books. My orange hoodie. The moon when it's full. Laughing even when it hurts. When Mom sings by accident. When someone remembers my name. Wind through the leaves. The color blue. Waking up. Still here. Megan couldn't speak. She just nodded, eyes wet, tracing the last two words with her finger. Still here. That night, Ellie asked Mom, "When I'm not here anymore, will you still make tea in the mornings?" Megan swallowed hard. "Every single morning." "Good," Ellie whispered. "Then I'll smell it. Wherever I am." The next few days blurred together in shades of quiet. Ellie slept more, spoke less. Megan read to her every night even when her daughter's eyes stayed closed. Sometimes she thought Ellie was dreaming. Sometimes she wasn't sure. On the last evening of December, snow fell outside soft and slow. The world went still. Megan sat beside Ellie's bed, holding her hand, reading from the notebook aloud, the list over and over like a prayer. When she finished, Ellie opened her eyes just enough to whisper, "You forgot one." Megan leaned closer. "What's that?" Ellie smiled, barely a breath. "You?" Then she closed her eyes again, peaceful. Megan stayed like that for hours, hand in hand, forehead pressed to her daughter's, listening to the rhythm of the snow outside the window. Later, she added one more line to the bottom of the list, written in her own trembling handwriting, the sound of her voice, even if only in memory. The hospice nurse had said it would happen slowly then, all at once. The body knows how to say goodbye, she'd told Megan, even when the heart doesn't. For Ellie, it began with longer naps, then heavier breaths, each one a little shallower than the last. The house was quiet now. Outside, snow still clung to the window ledge, melting in thin trails that caught the light. Inside, the world had shrunk to the soft beep of a monitor and the faint hum of the radiator. Megan kept the blinds open so the morning sun could find its way in. Ellie had always loved the light. She sat beside her daughter, brushing a strand of fine hair from her forehead. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "You comfortable?" Ellie's lips moved faintly. "Mm-hmm." Megan smiled. "Do you want me to read?" Ellie nodded just once. Megan opened the notebook, the list. Her voice trembled as she read slowly, softly, each word a heartbeat. Drawing. Mom's tea. The smell of books. The color blue. Waking up. Still here. She paused and added the last line in her mind, the sound of her voice. When she looked up, Ellie's eyes were half open, unfocused, but calm. "Mom, I'm here, sweetheart. Do you remember the yellow bird?" Megan frowned gently. "Which one? The one that hit the window last spring?" Megan nodded. "You thought it had died." Ellie smiled faintly, but it woke up, flew away. Her breath quivered fragile as silk. "I want to be like that." Megan's throat closed. She leaned down, forehead against her daughter's. "You already are," she whispered. Ellie's fingers curled slightly around hers. "Promise you'll still talk to me." "I promise." Megan breathed. "Every single day, even if you don't answer," she thought. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the window pane. A faint whistle passed through the frame. Gentle, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Ellie's chest rose once more, then again slower. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. Megan held her tighter. "I know, baby, I know." The last breath came just before dawn, quiet, steady, unbroken. There was no gasp, no struggle, just release. Megan didn't cry right away. She just sat there still as stone. her hand still wrapped around Ellie's. The snow outside had stopped. The first light of morning turned the window pale gold. On the windowsill, a small yellow bird landed, feathers puffed against the cold. It tilted its head, watching, then tapped the glass once, a tiny sound like a knock from another world. Megan lifted her gaze. Through tears, she whispered, "You found me again, didn't you?" The bird chirped softly, then flew off into the white sky. The room was silent again, but not empty. It was full of warmth, of memory, of love that didn't end, only changed shape. Megan leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting me be your mom." Then she sat back, closed her eyes, and let the sunlight fall across them both, mother and child, together one last time. The funeral came and went like a dream Megan couldn't quite wake from. People hugged her, said words that didn't reach her heart. She was so brave. She's in a better place. But what place could be better than here, than home, than her mother's arms? For weeks, Megan moved through her days like a ghost inside her own life. She answered calls she couldn't remember, accepted casseroles she didn't eat, smiled when people cried. But inside, there was only silence, the kind that echoes, not the kind that comforts. Then one morning she opened Ellie's laptop. It still held her daughter's login, the password, a mix of birthdays and favorite colors. The screen came alive with photo sketches of birds, stars, and a folder named "They'll Listen When It's Too Late." Megan clicked it. Inside were saved searches. How long do biopsies take? What does melanoma look like in kids? What happens when doctors don't believe you? And at the bottom, a letter Ellie never sent. If someone had listened the first time, maybe I'd still be here. Maybe my mom wouldn't look so sad all the time. I just want people to stop waiting. Please just look twice. Megan sat frozen, her hands trembling above the keyboard. Then she opened a blank page and began to type. 2 weeks later, she launched a website. The first post was titled, "Don't Wait for the Second Look." She told Ellie's story, the small red bump, the scarf, the misdiagnosis, the system that delayed everything. She didn't post the photos from the hospital. Instead, she posted the one that started it all, a tiny, ordinary mark under a child's jawline. Her caption read, "This is what it looked like before it killed my daughter." The post spread faster than she could comprehend. Thousands shared it. Parents booked checkups. Doctors reposted it, saying if it helps even one child, it's worth it. A nonprofit reached out asking if Megan would speak at their awareness event. The first time she stepped on stage, her hands shook. But then she looked down at the scarf around her neck, Ellie's navy one with the tiny suns, and the words came. She spoke about love and fear, about how one small symptom can be a warning, not a nuisance, about how waiting had cost her everything. If you see something on your child's skin, she told the crowd, don't wait, don't minimize it. Don't protect yourself from fear at the cost of their future. Just look, just ask, just go. There was silence after, then applause. Real, human, trembling applause. Dear Sir, that night Megan went home, brewed a cup of tea, and sat by the window where Ellie used to draw. Snowflakes drifted outside, slow and weightless. She whispered, "We did it, baby." For a moment the room felt warmer, as if someone small and bright had just walked through. On the desk beside her lay Ellie's notebook. Megan opened it and added one final line beneath the list. Watching someone else get a second chance. And then, softly, like an echo carried by the wind, she heard her daughter's voice clear. Young, unbroken, Mom, you kept your promise.